Most people believe they have a money problem. They look at their bank account, their income, the gap between where they are and where they want to be, and they conclude that the problem is located somewhere in front of them, in the market, in the economy, in the job they have or the job they cannot get, in the opportunity that has not yet arrived. And because they believe the problem is in front of them, they do what reasonable people do when a problem is in front of them. They press harder against it. They develop more plans. They apply more discipline, more effort, and more strategy. And for most of them, the effort compounds while the results do not. Eventually, the effort itself becomes the clearest evidence of how far they still have to go. This is not a small problem. It is the central misunderstanding of most people's financial lives, and it is not something they chose. It is simply where they are looking. They are looking in the wrong direction because the source of everything that appears in a person's financial life is not located in front of them. It has never been located in front of them. And no amount of pressure applied to the outer world will produce the kind of result that comes naturally and sustainably to someone whose inner world has been correctly arranged. Money is not primarily a strategy problem. Money is a frequency problem. And today I want to show you exactly what that means and what it costs most people that they have never been taught this. There are four specific things that, when aligned inside a person, remove the resistance that has been blocking the flow. When those four things align, the relationship with wealth does not just improve, it transforms. The outer world reorganizes itself around what has changed on the inside in ways that no strategy could have engineered and no amount of effort could have forced. And I'm going to show you that this is not a poetic claim. It is a precise description of how the law that governs all of your experience actually operates. Let me begin with the thing that almost no one teaching about money ever says. Money is a current. The word currency is not an accident. It is the nature of money accurately named. And like all currents, it has one essential quality. It flows. It does not accumulate at the source. It moves through the path of least resistance to the place where it is most naturally at home. This is not a spiritual metaphor. It is the description of how money has always behaved in every market, in every era, in every economy. The people who seem to attract wealth without excessive strain are not cleverer than others. They are not luckier. They are not more deserving. They have simply arranged themselves inside in a way that creates no resistance to the flow. Their inner state and their desire are in alignment, and alignment is the only real cause of abundance. The four things I'm going to describe are the four places where most people are unknowingly holding resistance. They are the four places where the current is being interrupted, and addressing them is not difficult in the way that most financial strategies are difficult. It is difficult in a different way, and I want to be honest about that from the beginning. What it requires is the one thing that most human beings have never been trained to do, to look honestly at the self they are actually inhabiting from the inside, and then to change it, not to improve it, to change it entirely. The first of the four is this: the alignment between your desire and your assumed state. Most people desire wealth while assuming scarcity, and they do not notice they are doing this because the assumption has been there so long, it no longer feels like an assumption. It feels like an honest reading of reality. They look at their current conditions and they call what they see the truth, but what they are looking at is not the truth. It is the echo of a previous inner state arriving in the physical world with its natural delay. The outer world is always the last thing to change, not the first. What they are calling reality is a report from the past, not information about what is available now. The precise word for what is needed here is a decision, not a preference, not an intention. A decision in the deepest sense of that word is a severing. It cuts off all alternative possibilities and settles into one. A person who has genuinely decided that they are someone for whom abundance is natural does not subsequently arrange their inner conversations around the contrary evidence. They do not need to. The decision is already made. They have assumed a new state, and that assumption begins immediately to do what all assumptions do. It reorganizes perception. It begins selecting different information from the environment. It tunes the nervous system to a different frequency, and the world responds to that frequency with the precision of a law rather than the arbitrariness of luck. This is not abstract teaching. A man once came to one of Neville Goddard's lectures in a state of genuine financial collapse. He had read the teaching, but had, by his own admission, done nothing with it in relation to his actual financial circumstances. He decided on that particular night to put it to a specific and measurable test. He constructed an imaginal scene, himself standing at a racetrack, sorting winning tickets, feeling the weight of the money the cashier was about to hand him. He enacted that scene every night for 3 weeks with enough specificity and feeling that it produced, in his own words, goosebumps. He did not adjust his outer strategy. He did not change his habits, his connections, or his approach to the market. He changed his assumed state. He decided, in the precise sense I am describing, that he was already the man who had won. When he traveled to the track after 3 weeks, every detail of the imaginal drama was realized. The cashier handed him a check for $84,000. Alignment is the mechanism. The assumption is the command. And the outer world, which is always the last thing to change, eventually has no choice but to catch up. If something in you is resisting what I just described, that resistance is information. It is pointing you toward the second of the 4 things that, when misaligned, block the current. Comment the word anchor below this video. We will send you free access to the Manifesting Anchor, a guide built around 2 precise words for returning to the feeling of the wish fulfilled in any moment when doubt intrudes and the outer world becomes loud. It is a single inner phrase that requires nothing but the willingness to use it. Comment anchor, and we will send it to you. Now let me speak about the second of the 4, resentment. I want to use that word deliberately because it is the correct word. Most people who are not living in the financial reality they want are carrying resentment, and most of them do not know it. They carry it toward people who have more. They carry it toward systems they believe have disadvantaged them. They carry it toward past decisions, past employers, past relationships that cost them something. And because the resentment feels justified, it rarely gets examined. It simply runs in the background, constantly draining the frequency that should be available for something else. Here is what resentment does at the level of frequency and alignment. Every active resentment is a claim that something outside you has power over what belongs to you. It maintains the assumption of shortage. It keeps the nervous system oriented toward what has been withheld rather than toward what is available. And because the law is absolutely faithful, it reflects that orientation back in the form of continued experience. The resentment is not punishing you. It is simply being believed, and the world is simply agreeing with what you believe. The release of resentment is not a moral exercise. It is an energetic one. When you release a resentment, you are not excusing what happened. You are reclaiming the frequency that the resentment was consuming. You are withdrawing the assumption of shortage that the resentment was maintaining. You are clearing the channel so that the current can flow again. This is forgiveness understood precisely, not as sentiment, but as the restoration of alignment. It is the second of the 4, and it is never spoken about in the same sentence as wealth creation, but it should be, because without it, the frequency is divided, and a divided frequency cannot produce coherent results. Here now is the third of the 4, and it is the one that defeats most people even after they have begun to understand and apply the first 2. It is what I will call the interval, the gap between the moment you assume a new inner state and the moment that assumption appears visibly in the outer world. This gap is real. It is not a sign that the law has failed. It is the natural timing of a world that is, as I said, always the last thing to change. The echo must play itself out before the new voice can be heard alone. The man who had won $84,000 at the track did not stop there. He wanted a sustained bank account, not a single event. He wanted to know whether what had happened was the operation of a law or the occurrence of an accident. So he constructed a new imaginal practice. He walked in his imagination into two separate banks. He saw the managers greet him with the warmth reserved for valued clients. He saw specific balances on his statements. He enacted this scene 3 times daily for less than 1 month. And when he returned to the track through what appeared on the surface to be a copying error, he held duplicate winning tickets on 2 races. The combined total of his winnings was 36,788. The imaginary accounting he had constructed 1 month earlier had totaled $36,533. That precision is not a coincidence. It is the law operating exactly as the law operates. But notice what was required between the imaginal practice and the result: a month of continued return to the assumed state. A month of living on the inside as someone whose financial reality had already been decided while the outer world had not yet confirmed anything. That period is the interval, and most people do not survive it. When the outer world does not immediately reflect the new assumption, they interpret the silence as evidence that the assumption is false. They return to the old state. They undo the work and they conclude that the teaching does not work, when in fact, what happened was simply that they abandoned the frequency just before the bridge of incidents had a chance to complete itself. Surrender is not passivity. It is not indifference. It is the act of remaining loyal to your assumed state through the interval without requiring the outer world to confirm it before you are willing to continue believing it. It is the third of the four, and without it, the first two cannot produce their full result. The fourth is the deepest and the most resisted. It is the question of whether you actually assume yourself to be the kind of person for whom abundance is natural, not whether you want it, not whether you believe in the law intellectually, whether you, at the level of your automatic inner life, where no one is watching and nothing needs to be performed, assume that wealth belongs to you the way your own name belongs to you, without defense, without justification, without the ongoing internal negotiation that most people conduct with themselves about whether they are deserving enough, ready enough, good enough for what they want. This is what I spoke about when I told Neville that the work must begin with self. Find self. Do not be ashamed of the being you are. Discover it, and then begin the changing of that self. What he needed was not a technique. He needed to stop inhabiting the self that was producing the results he already had. He needed to find the self he was actually being beneath the aspirations and the intentions, and then he needed to change it, not adjust it. Change it. The person who assumes themselves to be someone for whom wealth flows naturally does not chase money. They do not monitor it anxiously. They do not perform gratitude as a strategy for attracting it. They simply occupy a state in which abundance is assumed the way the floor is assumed to be beneath your feet. And from that state, wealth finds them. Not because the universe has rewarded their virtue, but because the current is flowing through a channel with no resistance. Abundance finds you when you stop being someone who is reaching for it and become someone for whom it has already arrived on the inside. Now, I want to show you what the alignment of all four looks like at scale, because the pattern I have been describing does not only operate in the lives of individuals, it operates wherever consciousness is the cause, which is everywhere. Neville had a friend who worked in the advertising field for a major international industry. The company's profits had been declining, and this friend persuaded a board of 20 multimillionaires to apply a single principle to the problem: that imagining creates reality, and that a desired state assumed as already true will begin to produce that reality in the world. The board members resisted at first. They considered themselves above this kind of approach. Their ethical codes, as they understood them, did not permit it. But this man persuaded them that this is how the law actually operates, and they agreed to try. In the first quarter after the principle was applied, the industry not only stopped its decline, Their net profits for that quarter exceeded the previous year's first quarter by $75 million. That is coherent creation, and it is the only kind of wealth that is sustainable, that scales. That does not destroy what it builds because it is built on alignment rather than on pressure. There is another way to generate money. It uses manipulation, short term advantage, the extraction of value without the creation of it. And it can work for a time, but it produces fragility. It requires constant maintenance. It cannot expand without increasing the pressure that sustains it. And eventually, it collapses under its own weight because it is being held up by effort rather than supported by the natural flow of a current through an aligned channel. The people who generate wealth sustainably are not doing something that other people cannot do. They are doing something that other people have not yet learned to align. Their inner state and their desire are not in contradiction. Their resentments have been cleared. They have learned to remain loyal to their assumed state through the interval. And they have settled at the deepest level of their inner life into the assumption that abundance belongs to them as naturally as their own breathing. When all four of those things are true, the strategy becomes almost secondary. The strategy follows. The opportunities present themselves. The right people appear. The timing organizes itself around what has already been decided on the inside. If you are somewhere in the middle of your own interval right now, if you have made the assumption and the outer world has not yet agreed, this is the moment that matters most. Not the moment of the initial clarity. This moment when the evidence is still quiet and the old assumptions are pressing back in. If you want something specific and practical for those moments, comment the word anchor below. We will send you free access to the manifesting anchor. It is built around two words said once internally that return you to the frequency of the fulfilled, not a mantra, not an affirmation. One precise phrase that addresses the assumption underneath the doubt and restores the alignment without drama or effort. Comment anchor and we will send it to you. Let me close with this. You do not have a strategy problem. You have never had a strategy problem. What you have is the same thing that almost everyone who struggles financially has, a frequency that is divided against itself. A desire for abundance housed inside an assumption of shortage, an intention toward wealth undermined by the resentments that drain the channel, a new inner state abandoned before the bridge of incidents had time to build, and beneath all of it, a self that has not yet fully assumed that abundance is natural to it. These four things are not complicated. They do not require unusual intelligence, spiritual advancement, or access to resources that most people lack. They require the one thing that is hardest to give, the willingness to turn away from the outer world as the source of information about what is possible, and to find that information instead in the only place where anything has ever actually been decided, inside. In the hidden arrangement of the self that no one else can observe, and that the world is faithfully and constantly reflecting back to you. This is what it means to align with abundance rather than to chase it. Abundance does not have to be caught, it has to be allowed. And the allowing begins with the four things I have described today. There is a teaching that goes deeper into one specific aspect of what we have covered here, the aspect of what happens in the interior of a person when they finally understand what their outer world has actually been telling them all along. A woman in that teaching lay confined to a bed by a condition that had not responded to any treatment. She recovered, not through intensity or force or any technique performed with greater determination, but through 1 week of quietly returning in her imagination to a place she had loved, simply visiting it, simply being there without strain because the feeling was genuine. And one morning, the outer world caught up with the inner one all at once. That teaching is called the wealth secret. Abdullah taught Neville that less than 1% will ever use. It is appearing on your screen right now.